It all started, or perhaps ended, outside a dog shelter. She was crouched beside a golden retriever, fake laughing for someone else's Instagram story. I stood behind her, holding the leash of a dog she had no intention of adopting, wondering how many more Saturday mornings I'd waste pretending everything was fine. I reached out, lightly touching her hand. She didn't flinch, but yanked it away instead. "Get off me," she said loudly, without hesitation or apology. Her words echoed like a public dismissal, sharp and unfiltered. A shelter volunteer glanced at me, then quickly looked away, as if she could feel the weight of the moment too. It felt like a slap, though no hands were raised. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets and stared blankly at the sky, pretending it held some kind of answer. She returned to laughing for someone else's camera. Later that day, she announced she was heading to a yoga class across town to reset her energy. I offered to drive, but she declined. I followed her anyway. It wasn't yoga, not even close. She parked behind a shuttered nail salon. A man was already waiting. Tall, clean-cut, unfamiliar. He didn't greet her like a friend. Instead, he kissed her neck with the familiarity of someone who knew her well. I watched her lean into him, melting into his presence. I don't know how long I sat there in my car, frozen. Long enough for them to disappear through a side door. Long enough to despise the suffocating air inside my vehicle. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I wrote one word on the fogged-up window with my finger, "Noted." I didn't confront her that night or the next. She came home glowing, waking me up just to mention she was considering dyeing her hair. I nodded, saying nothing. The next morning, I printed something at the office, a photo I'd taken from my car that evening. I folded it neatly and slipped it into her purse without a sound. Days passed, and she didn't mention it, but she changed. Quieter, nicer, almost sweet. The kind of sweetness people exude when they know they're standing on a trapdoor, unsure when it will open beneath them. By Thursday, she tried to act normal. "You want me to pick up dinner?" she asked, as if nothing was wrong. I nodded. She brought back Thai food, my favorite, and for a fleeting moment I almost believed her act. She sat across from me at the table, smiling too often, leaning in too much. But the woman sitting there wasn't the same one who used to write emails filled with excitement about seeing me again. Now I was the one waiting, for answers, for apologies, for any sign that she still cared. But deep down, I knew better. That version of her didn't exist anymore. Maybe it never had. The pause before she grabbed her bag the next morning said it all. She knew the photo was there. She'd seen it. She just hadn't figured out how to spin the narrative yet. And trust me, she could spin anything. The moment she asked, "How was your week?" I knew. It had been months since she last showed any genuine interest in my life. I didn't respond directly. Instead, I said, "You look tired." For the briefest second, her facade cracked before she recovered with a shaky, "Just a long week." She braced herself, expecting anger, accusations, or confrontation. But I had nothing left to give. The energy to fight had drained out of me long ago. What I wanted wasn't revenge, it was closure. A quiet, deliberate end that would resonate more deeply than any shouting match ever could. Saturday rolled around, and she brought up her networking brunch again. "Have fun," I replied simply. She hesitated, searching for hidden traps, but there were none, at least not yet. As soon as the garage door closed behind her little white car, the one I'd paid for, I got to work. I opened the safe, pulling out the folder labeled mortgage. I scanned documents, made copies, gathered keys, and organized backup emails. This wasn't about retaliation. It was about disappearing from her world as quietly and completely as she had disappeared from mine. That evening, she came home earlier than expected. No perfume, no effort in her appearance, just red-rimmed eyes and a defeated posture. She walked in slowly, dropped her bag, and sat beside me on the couch. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. "Ellis, did you see something?" I turned down the TV volume and met her gaze. I saw enough. Her expression faltered, tears welling up. Maybe she'd already cried before coming home. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "It was stupid. It didn't mean anything." "Stop," I interrupted, my voice calm, cold. "Don't ruin it further with lies." Silence stretched between us. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, not dramatically, just enough to remind her how it felt when she dismissed me at the shelter all those months ago. "You said I was embarrassing," I reminded her, "so don't act like you didn't see this coming." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. That's when I stood up, walked past her, and went to bed. No slamming doors, no yelling, just one man taking back the last fragment of himself. She stayed on the couch for hours that night. I could hear her shifting occasionally, the creak of leather as she leaned forward, perhaps hoping I'd emerge and say something more. But I didn't. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening only to my own breathing and the faint echoes of her regret settling in. For once, I didn't rush to mend what she'd broken. When I woke up, she was already in the kitchen. The scent of pancakes filled the air, a feeble attempt at peacekeeping. She hadn't made breakfast in months, let alone pancakes, which weren't even her thing. They were mine, my comfort food. There she stood, wearing an old college hoodie, trying to mask everything with syrup and forced smiles. "You hungry?" she asked without looking at me. I pulled out a chair but didn't sit. "Do you really think pancakes erase what you did?" She froze, spatula hovering mid-air. "I'm trying, Ellis." "No," I corrected her. "You're panicking." She turned off the stove. For a brief moment, I thought she might throw the pan across the room. Instead, she set it down gently on the counter, leaning on it with both hands flat, her head bowed. "I messed up," she whispered finally. "I know I did, but it's not like you've been here either." "There it is," I said, tilting my head. "The blame transfer, the oldest trick in the book." She looked at me, searching for a reaction, but I didn't flinch. Because I hadn't flirted with strangers, because I hadn't started hiding my phone or coming home reeking of another man's cologne. "I felt alone, Ellis," she said, her voice trembling. "You stopped seeing me." "No," I replied quietly. "You stopped being worth seeing." That hit her hard. Her eyes filled with tears almost instantly. But I didn't reach for her, not this time. She wasn't crying because she missed me. She was crying because the man who used to chase her tears was done chasing. Later that afternoon, she texted me while I was upstairs. "Can we talk later properly, please?" I didn't reply. She started trying harder after that, coming home earlier, sitting beside me on the couch, laughing at shows she used to mock, asking if I wanted to go for walks. But I didn't want a rehearsed version of her. I didn't want the polished, guilty mask she wore so well. Then, 3 nights later, I got the notification. A $64 charge at a boutique hotel across town. Our joint card, her name, her mistake. I walked downstairs holding my phone, its screen glowing. "This was yesterday," I said, tossing it gently onto the coffee table. She glanced at it, her face draining of color. I was just meeting him to end it," she stammered. "I didn't touch him, I swear. I just needed to say it face to face." "And I needed honesty," I shot back. "Do you remember what that looks like?" She folded into herself, arms crossed tightly over her chest. I don't know how to fix this. That's the first true thing you've said, I replied coldly. And with that, I grabbed my keys, left the house, and didn't say where I was going. I just drove. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. I let her sit there in the silence she had created, because now it was hers to carry. 2 days passed. She didn't bring it up, not the hotel, not the charge, not the lie, not a word. It was as if she hoped silence could cover her guilt, like makeup covering a bruise. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I had stopped playing the fool the second I saw her lie to my face, her hands still smelling faintly of another man's cologne. The strange part? I didn't even feel angry anymore, not the red-hot rage you'd expect. I felt something worse, that heavy, aching indifference that comes when you've loved someone so much for so long that your heartbreak gets tired before your voice does. I was done yelling, done pleading. All that was left in me was clarity. She tried to act like we were rebuilding, cooked dinner, put her phone face up on the table, laughed a little too loud at my dry jokes, even wore the shirt I once said I liked 2 years ago. I let her play the part, but I was watching. On Saturday, she went to run errands. She absent-mindedly left her bag on the kitchen chair, something completely out of character for her. It wasn't about trust, it was sheer carelessness. She assumed I was back in her orbit, revolving around her world again. But I opened it, not because I needed more evidence. I already knew. What I needed was understanding, a glimpse into the kind of lie she'd been living behind my back. At the bottom of her purse, wedged between a pack of gum and a crumpled receipt, lay a motel key card. Plain and generic, with no branding, just a red sticker marking room 312. She had been meticulous, deleting messages, avoiding perfume, steering clear of late-night slips. Yet this one detail slipped through her careful facade. It felt almost poetic in its pathetic simplicity, a breadcrumb of betrayal she never thought I'd find. When she came home, I stood at the sink, washing my hands as if trying to scrub away something unclean. "Hey," she chirped too brightly, "want to order in tonight?" I dried my hands slowly, deliberately. "How was room 312?" I asked. She froze mid-step, her eyes darting toward her purse like it might somehow rescue her. She didn't even attempt to lie. Instead, she unraveled right there, standing in the middle of the kitchen. "That was weeks ago," she whispered. "You've been lying for months. What's another few days?" Her voice cracked under the weight of her own guilt. Her mouth opened, then closed again. That was it, the collapse, the moment when the liar runs out of script. She sank into the nearest chair, her body giving up on the pretense. "I don't know why I did it," she admitted finally, staring at the floor. "He made me feel wanted, like I mattered again." "And I made you feel what?" I asked, my tone steady but laced with quiet pain. "Invisible," she murmured, her voice trembling. "No," I corrected her, the word sharper than I intended. "Safe. I gave you safe. A soft place to land, quiet reliability." And then it hit me. She hadn't wanted safety. She had craved fire, passion, until the flames consumed her and left her gasping for air. I said nothing. I walked past her, upstairs, and locked the door behind me. Not to keep her out, but to lock myself in. Sliding down against the wall, I stared at the wedding photo still hanging where it always had been. That's when I began packing, not my suitcase, but boxes for her things. Quietly, methodically, without drama or shouting. I folded her favorite sweaters, slid jewelry boxes into tissue paper, wrapped the perfume bottles she once wore for someone else. Each item felt like a muted memory, its volume turned down, blurred, no longer mine to hold on to. Downstairs she paced, likely waiting for some explosive reaction I refused to give. What she failed to grasp was that the most dangerous anger is the kind cloaked in calm. When I descended the stairs, carrying one of the taped boxes, she looked up with tear-filled eyes. "What? What are you doing?" she stammered. I set the box by the door. "Helping you move forward. You made your choice. I'm just clearing the path." She moved toward me, her steps heavy, as though her legs carried more weight than before. "Ellis, no, we can fix this. I'll cut him off. I already did. Please, you don't need to do this." I tilted my head, meeting her gaze. "I don't need to," I said simply. And with that, the silence between us spoke louder than any words ever could. "You had an affair. You deceived me, manipulated my reality, and publicly shamed me. Do you honestly believe this is still your decision to make?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't soften. I didn't close the gap between us. I let her feel the chasm that had formed, a divide she could no longer bridge. "You're really going to throw everything away?" she asked, her voice trembling. A bitter laugh escaped me. "You already threw it away. I'm just picking up the pieces." She sank onto the edge of the couch, silent. I moved to the coat closet, pulling out her scarves and boots, placing them gently into a box. She didn't protest. Part of her probably thought this was another emotional ploy, some desperate attempt to guilt her into staying. But it wasn't. I was done being the man who excused every warning sign because he believed love could conquer all. I left one room untouched, her vanity. If she wanted to look in the mirror and see what betrayal looked like, she deserved that much. The next morning, she was awake before me, clutching a mug of coffee, her eyes swollen from crying. She didn't try to touch me or kiss me. Instead, she simply asked, "Are you serious about this?" I took a sip of my coffee. "You told me I was embarrassing. That was the last honest thing you said. Everything else has been an act." She nodded slowly. "I guess I never thought you'd actually leave." I stood and replied, "That's the thing. You never thought I could." By the following afternoon, most of her belongings were packed. No movers, no posts online. I loaded her things into her car while she stood on the porch, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if holding herself together. There was no goodbye. Neither of us spoke as she drove away. At the end of the driveway, she paused for a moment. For a fleeting second, I thought she might roll down the window, say something, anything. But she didn't. She drove off. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Freedom. Days passed before she returned, knocking softly on the door. Not a call, not a text, just that hesitant knock I'd only ever heard when she wanted something. I didn't answer immediately. I made her wait, letting her stand in the silence she had once forced me to endure for months. When I finally opened the door, she was standing there with a small box in her hands and a face full of manufactured bravery. "I left a few things," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Can I get them?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked past me hesitantly, perhaps hoping I'd stop her, start a conversation, or break down and beg her to stay. But I didn't. I watched her climb the stairs, listening to the familiar creak of the floorboards I used to fix while she distractedly scrolled through her phone. Back then, she was never fully present, always half listening, half texting, and now she was utterly alone. 10 minutes later, she descended the stairs, holding a sweater, her curling iron, and an old photo album I'd forgotten even existed. She traced her fingers over the cover as if it held some forgotten significance. "Do you want this?" she asked, avoiding my gaze. "No," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. She nodded, as though she'd anticipated my answer, but it still struck a nerve. Then she set the album on the table and lingered there, unsure of what to do next. Her hesitation was palpable. "You okay?" she finally asked. The question almost made me laugh. "You okay?" As if this were some minor inconvenience and not the unraveling of everything we once had. "I'll be fine," I said. She exhaled sharply. "I know you hate me." I didn't respond. "But I don't hate you," she added quickly. "I miss us." That's when I looked up at her for the first time and said, "You don't miss us. You miss being missed. You miss what I gave you." Her eyes flickered with confusion, uncertainty flashing across her face. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, holding it toward me. A bracelet, simple and silver. The one I'd given her on our first anniversary. She hadn't worn it in years. "I thought maybe you'd want it back," she murmured. "I don't," I said. "I can't wear it," she admitted softly. "It feels wrong now." "Then throw it away." Slowly, she lowered her hand and placed it back into the box. I didn't ask why she'd come back. It wasn't about the sweater or the curling iron or even the bracelet. She returned because she realized I meant every word, that I wasn't bluffing, that the person standing before her wasn't someone she could control anymore. At the door, she paused and turned to me. "If you ever change your mind," she began, but I cut her off. Not harshly, just firmly. She hesitated, giving me one last lingering look before stepping outside into the cold. When I closed the door behind her, I braced myself for sadness, emptiness, or even heartbreak. But none of that came. Instead, I felt clarity. The man who used to hold her hand when no one else would, he had finally chosen himself. 3 weeks passed in silence. No calls, no texts, just an unbroken void where updates once lived. I stopped checking her social media profiles, no longer torturing myself with carefully curated images designed to project indifference. In truth, I no longer cared how she presented herself to the world. She chose distance, I offered space. What I didn't expect was for her best friend to show up instead. It was a rainy Thursday evening, and I'd just returned home from work, drenched and too exhausted to muster much energy. As I stepped inside, there was a sharp knock at the door. Opening it revealed Belle, her closest friend since college, standing there in a hoodie and jeans, arms crossed, looking deeply uncomfortable. "I need to talk," she said, without preamble. Belle rarely visited alone and never contacted me unless it was to ask if I knew Lindra's whereabouts. My instincts told me something was off. I let her in, watching as she paced nervously before blurting out, "She told you everything, right?" "Enough," I replied, locking the door behind us. Belle sighed heavily and perched on the edge of the couch, as if afraid to touch anything for too long. After a moment, she spoke again. "She's not telling you the whole truth, not all of it." I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air, waiting for her to continue. Belle hesitated, her gaze fixed on the floor as she spoke. "It wasn't just one guy," she said quietly. Her voice was heavy, but I could hear the weight of what she was about to reveal. "She mentioned a coworker from a marketing event in Denver." My chest tightened, but I stayed silent, letting her continue. "She claimed it happened only once, but admitted she had bragged about it later, saying it made her feel alive." When Belle finally looked up, her expression was filled with guilt. "I hated hearing it," she confessed, "but I didn't say anything because, well, she's my friend." "And now?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "She's still seeing him," Belle replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "She lied about ending it." I leaned back, arms crossed, absorbing the truth that had been hidden beneath layers of deception. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch. I simply nodded once and said, "Thanks for telling me." As she got up to leave, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I think she's scared that you meant it, that it's really over." I nodded again. "It is." When she left, I stood alone in the hallway, staring at the spot where she'd been sitting. Hearing it from someone else made it more real than ever. Not just the betrayal itself, but its depth and complexity. It wasn't a single misstep, it was a pattern, a series of deliberate choices. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I wandered through the house, touching objects she left behind. A mug, a book, her favorite pillow. They were no longer reminders of shared moments, but souvenirs of a person I once trusted, someone who had slipped away long before she physically left. At 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message. "Lindra, are you awake?" I stared at it for a full minute before blocking the number. Just like that, the door closed. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the house, filling every corner with warmth. It felt strange, not because the sun hadn't risen like that before, but because I noticed it. For the first time in months, maybe years, the light didn't feel artificial. There was no tension, no forced smiles, no walking on eggshells. Just silence and sunlight that didn't hurt. Her things were gone. The toothbrush, the slippers, even the scarf she always forgot about until it snowed. The space she left behind should have felt empty, but instead it felt freeing. I could breathe again in my own home. That weekend, I went to the farmer's market alone. It was something she used to complain about. Too crowded, too slow, too boring. But I loved it, always had. I bought fresh peaches, chatted with a woodworker about custom shelves, and for the first time in ages, I didn't check my phone every few minutes, waiting for a text that never came. On my way back, I saw a couple holding hands. It didn't sting this time. I didn't envy them. I just hoped they were kind to each other, that neither would take the other for granted. I wished them well, genuinely meaning it. When I returned home, there was a letter in my mailbox. No return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. "You're probably still angry, or worse, indifferent. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for the lies or even the cheating, but for treating your love like it was replaceable. It wasn't." I see that now. It was clear I didn't need to read further. Carefully folding the letter, I approached the fireplace and watched as the flames consumed it. That night, I slept deeply, like someone who had finally understood a profound truth. Peace doesn't arrive when you're loved by another. It comes when you love yourself enough to let go. This isn't a tale of vengeance. I didn't ruin her life or chase her down in anger. There were no dramatic outbursts, no public declarations. Instead, I chose to heal, calmly, completely. Somewhere out there, she might still believe I'll change my mind someday, but I won't. Because sometimes the most impactful choice is to simply do nothing. If you've ever been in a relationship where silence spoke louder than words, or if someone tried to return after leaving, share your story. Did you forgive them? Did you cut ties like I did? And if this story resonated with you, consider following along. More unfiltered and thought-provoking content is on the way.